Guillermo has always treated me like his golden canary, even though I have never spent any of his money. When his first love returned to China, I was sent to another man by him to help my brother close a deal and get his benefits. However, when I became really intimate with that man, Guillermo lost control. He said that I was just for him to play with, and he didn't expect that I would actually get this close to someone else. I stayed up late drinking with Guillermo at a private club. He gently lifted my chin, and I felt uncomfortable, so I tilted my head slightly to avoid it. For some reason, he always liked to do this to me, as if I were just an obedient pet. But it was completely different with Suyu. He didn't even dare to look at Suyu again, even though Suyu spoke coldly to him, and I was obviously his nominal girlfriend. Guillermo lifted his glass, his eyes a little drunk, and asked me, "Jiangqing, how long have you been with me?" I pushed away the wine he offered, and said, "We've been together for 3 years. Guillermo's friends were heckling from the side, "Hey, is the canary misbehaving? Guillermo, you need to discipline her." Guillermo raised an eyebrow and asked what reward I wanted. I shook my head and remained silent, tired from explaining countless times. In the past 3 years, I haven't spent a single penny, and the bank card Guillermo gave me has always been kept in the safe. I have never used the luxury goods he has given me. The only thing that has touched me is that once, Guillermo gave me an album with pictures of him as a teenager. I took it and sometimes look at it in my spare time. But Guillermo still treats me like a plaything, not an equal lover. He leaned against me, like a lazy cat, and his fingers traced circles on my chest. "Do you know that Suyu has returned to China?" I suddenly became nervous. Suyu was Guillermo's first love. Guillermo even called her name during our intimacy. After that accident, I never went to his apartment again. Today is the first time we have met in half a month. His eyes are a little drunk, but his tone is unusually calm. "Jiangqing, this time Suyu and I must come to an end." My hand stiffly stopped in place, still maintaining the position of embracing Guillermo. My throat was dry, my stomach convulsed, and the pain gradually spread to my heart. After a long while, I managed to ask, "So, what do you mean?" Guillermo handed me a business card and said with a complex expression, "Jiangqing, we might have to end it." I stared at the card in silence. Over the past 3 years, I had devoted all my efforts to Guillermo. Although others thought I did it for his wealth, I never explained. I took care of him all night after he got drunk, just because he was afraid of waking up alone. I flew thousands of miles in the middle of winter to bring him a handful of snow, just because he said he wanted to see a snowy scene. Later I learned that it was snowing heavily in the city where Suyu was that day. What he really wanted to see was not the handful I brought. I worried about his stomach disease, his drinking habits, and I wanted to help him relieve work pressure. I took good care of him, spent a lot of time and effort, and even made my family unhappy, and my mother felt that I was indecisive. But I still can't compare to Suyu. I can't even compare to the way she looks at me. I felt a sense of oppression in my heart. After a few times of my throat closing up, I swallowed, raised my hand to lift the vodka in front of me, and gulped it down with my head tilted back. Although my chest felt even more oppressed, this feeling made me feel slightly more awake. I gently pushed away Guillermo's hand. "Fine," I smiled at him slightly, "to satisfy your request." Guillermo frowned slightly, as if he didn't expect me to be so direct. "Jiangqing, I can recommend a good job for you." I shook my head to reject him, got up and buttoned my suit. "Don't need you to worry. Guillermo, everything you've given me over the past 3 years, whether it's the bank card, the watch, or even those limited edition sneakers, is in my safe at home. You should remember the password." I turned around and was about to leave. Guillermo grabbed my wrist. "Jiangqing, wait." He tilted his head slightly, with a little confusion in his eyes. "Are you really so indifferent?" I didn't say anything, shook off his hand and was about to leave. Just as I was about to leave the box, Guillermo caught up to me, holding a mobile phone in his hand. The box suddenly fell silent, and I could hear Suyu's cold voice on the other end of the phone, telling her to go to her room before I would believe that you were really over. Guillermo hung up the phone, his face expressionless, his eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a hint of gloom. He put away his phone and slowly walked closer to me, asking, "Jiangqing, I'm going to ask you one last time, do you really not care at all?" I looked at him coldly. Since you want to split up, I don't care either way. Guillermo narrowed his eyes, a sneer at the corner of his mouth. After a while, he suddenly laughed contemptuously. Very well, if that's the case. Then he took a card out of his pocket and slapped it on my chest, saying, "Upstairs in 1808, there's a man. I hope you go keep him company and make my business tomorrow go well. If you do, the breakup fee is essential. Otherwise, you may lose everything." He raised his hand and pinched my chin, his eyes full of menace. I felt a sense of oppression in my chest and a pang in my heart. I grabbed his wrist tightly. "Guillermo, what do you take me for?" I felt a sense of loss as he looked at me with a cold smile. "What's the harm in lending me to your friends for a bit of fun?" I stared at him, my heart heavy. This was a man I had loved for so long. His friends couldn't bear to watch any longer and came forward to persuade him. "Guillermo, you've gone too far." But Guillermo still insisted on sticking the room card key into my hand. To go or not to go? I took a deep breath, feeling heavy-hearted. I looked down at the room card key, remained silent for a long time, and finally gave a cold laugh and said, "Yes." I clutched the room card key tightly, turned around and strode away. Guillermo shouted behind me, "Jiangqing." I stopped and waited for him to continue. But in the end, he didn't say anything, not a single word. I shook my head and smiled. For the last time, I did as he wished. From now on, I will sever all ties and never look back. As I rode the elevator up to the floor, I met the hotel manager. When he saw me, he immediately stepped aside and respectfully asked if I needed anything. I shook my head and said it was a personal matter. The room card that Guillermo gave me was from my family's hotel. In fact, including Guillermo, they are all executives of my family business. It's just that I haven't officially taken over the family business yet, and outsiders don't know this. I was worried that the gap in status would affect our relationship, so I kept it a secret from Emogu. I knew that this room housed an important client of our group, and that Emogu was able to negotiate with him because I had recommended him to my mother. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was dark, with only a floor lamp in the corner emitting a faint light. A slender figure reclined on the sofa, with short, neatly groomed hair, wearing a dark gray suit jacket, which was casually draped over the armrest, and a white shirt with 2 buttons undone. This must be the big client, Shinrue. Hearing the door open, he opened his eyes and his gaze was sharp. A moment later, he gave a small smile. "It seems that kid Guillermo got carried away." He stood up, stretched, and thought to himself, I only casually mentioned that he had found a pretty girl, but he took it seriously. I lowered my head and thought to myself, if you were just saying that casually, I'll leave. No matter how angry I am, I don't want to belittle myself so easily. Shinrue looked at me with raised eyebrows and asked, "Did he force you to come?" He seemed to find this hard to accept. I didn't respond. Shinrue frowned. "Is that really the case?" He shook his head and said, "No, I don't want to do that." "You should go back soon." I nodded and turned to leave. When I got home, I locked myself in my room for 3 whole days. On the 4th day, my mother dragged me out, saying that she wanted to take me to a social gathering to network and prepare me for taking over the family business in the future. When I followed my mother into the private room, I immediately saw the familiar figure of Shinrue. When he saw me, he raised his eyebrows and his lips moved, but in the end he didn't say anything. He just gave a meaningful smile. I understood that he was teasing me, but I could only pretend that nothing had happened and exchange pleasantries with him. Even if it hurt, the rules of the business world still had to be followed. Shinrue raised his glass and said to me, "President Jiang, here's to you." His smile was broad, but there was sarcasm in his eyes. I knew in my heart that most of the rich girls nowadays like celebrities and supermodels, and it has always been them chasing after others, so why would they be ignored? I raised my glass and gulped it down in one go. President Shin was spot on. I poured myself another glass and toasted Shinrue, apologizing profusely for making him the butt of everyone's jokes. The strong alcohol made me feel hot and I nearly lost my temper. My mother, who usually doesn't say much, patted my shoulder, reminding me not to drink too much and to save some face for Shinrue. I held back the urge to cough and forced a smile. It was true that I was embarrassing myself. Then I nodded slightly to apologize to Shinrue for my behavior. Shinrui looked at my red and swollen eyes, was silent for a moment, and nodded gently. The next evening, he did not take the initiative to clink glasses with me, but there was more depth in his eyes. After the banquet, my mother asked me to take Shinrui back to the hotel. The car was quiet, and Shinrui kept looking out the window. When we were almost at the hotel, he suddenly said, "I owe you an apology." I was a little surprised. "What's wrong?" Shinrui shook his head. "I originally wanted to laugh at you, but I realized that I was laughing at your scar. No one who has truly given their all should be mocked." "I'm sorry." I gripped the steering wheel and whispered, "No need to apologize. I caused this myself." The car pulled up in front of the hotel. I got out and opened the door for Shinrui, and that was as far as I went. Shinrui looked at me, a smile on the corner of his mouth, and asked if I didn't want to go for another round. "I've got some good wine." I hesitated, thinking that it was getting late. He was an important client, and I didn't want to say no straight away. Besides, inviting someone who has just broken up with someone to drink might be more risky for him. Shinrui said with a light smile, "I'm not afraid, so what are you afraid of?" A hint of seriousness shone in his eyes. "I have also had my heart broken, so we are in the same boat." I was touched by the sadness that flashed in his eyes for a moment. If there were a mirror, my eyes might also be dull and lifeless. I closed the car door and decided to go along with his idea. These days, I struggle with nightmares every night, dreams filled with Gumo's cold gaze, the room key that bothers me, and the sight of him and Suyu being intimate. I feel like I'm about to collapse. I really need a drink to numb my wounded heart and forget that 3 years of hard work has led to such an ending. I followed Shinrui into the lobby. The lobby manager respectfully walked up and was about to speak when a shocked voice suddenly came from behind him, "Jiangqing?" I froze, and heard it was Gumo's voice. The surprise on his face and the anger in his tone made me uneasy. "How come you're here?" I turned around and saw Gumo coming out of the hotel restaurant with a few clients, his sharp gaze fixed on me. He glanced back and forth between me and Shinrui, barely managing to force a smile, and said, "Mr. Shin, it seems like the candidate I recommended is not bad, right?" Shinrui chuckled lightly, put his arm around my waist, and nodded towards him, looking quite satisfied. I was shocked by Shinrui's actions, and Gumo was also stunned. His face instantly turned pale, and his voice trembled as he said, "Mr. Shin, can I borrow Jiangqing for 2 minutes?" I suddenly remembered that I had something to ask her. Shinrui glanced at me and, seeing that I didn't refuse, shrugged and said, "Just 2 minutes, we're waiting to go upstairs." Gumo pursed his lips and waved at me to indicate that he wanted me to come. I didn't move. Gumo lowered his voice and said coldly as before, "Jiangqing, come here for a moment." His handsome face was full of anger, and the chill in his eyes grew deeper and deeper. I took a deep breath and walked towards him. Having come this far, I didn't know what else he had to say. It couldn't be that he wanted to apologize to me. Gumo pulled me a few more steps away, his fingertips cold. His face was gloomy, and he said with gritted teeth, "Jiang, you're so disappointing." I froze. I could accept anything he said, but to call me shameless, I couldn't accept. Where exactly was I shameless? I asked coldly. A chill flashed in Gumo's eyes, his voice low and threatening. "I didn't think you would actually go upstairs. I didn't think you would actually do it." His gaze swept over me, as if he wanted to see through me. "I don't know what else you guys plan to do." Huh? I looked at him, exasperated, and felt both ironic and funny. I looked down at his clenched fist and retorted, "Didn't you tell me to go up there?" "Gumo, I'm just doing what you said. Actually, I'm just a little angry." Gumo's face was gloomy, and he clenched his fists as if he were trying to control his emotions. "I didn't know that you would actually have sex with someone else, Jiangqing. Do you have any shame?" Usually, Gumo is always elegant and composed, his emotions never showing, and he always speaks to me in a joking tone, more often than not testing me. But at this moment, his face was distorted, trembling with anger, like a gambler who has lost his last hope, and it seemed even more real. It was a bit like the way he looked when he was a teenager. I closed my eyes and sighed, "Gumo, I should go. We're over." After I finished speaking, I turned around and walked towards Shinrui, letting him put his arm around me as we took the elevator up to the floor together. Behind me came the low voice of Guillermo, with a hint of panic, Jiangqing. I stopped in my tracks, but I still walked forward, not looking back. Shinrui and I drank late into the night. We didn't speak, just poured wine quietly, clinked glasses silently, and drank in silence. I looked out the window, recalling the bits and pieces of these past 3 years. He looked into the distance, wondering what he was thinking. After a long while, a trace of moisture flashed in his eyes, and he gave me a wry smile, asking, "How is it that there are so many people in this world who don't know how to cherish?" He laughed helplessly, wondering if people who trample on the hearts of others wouldn't feel any pain. I shook my head and drank the wine in my glass. Shinrui turned his head and looked out the window at the bustling city, tears silently sliding down his face. We drank from dusk until dawn, a full 5 hours. I carried the sleeping Shinrui to bed, covered him up, and staggered downstairs. As I reached the lobby, a voice called out to me. It was Jiangqing. I turned around and saw Guillermo standing in the middle of the lobby, his suit jacket slung over his shoulders, his hair a little messy and his eyes red. He said hoarsely, "Jiangqing, I've been waiting here all night. Why are you only coming now?" He took a few steps towards me. "I know you well, there can't be anything between you, can there?" I rubbed my temples, unable to speak. My hangover was giving me a terrible headache, and my chest ached. Guillermo's gaze was sharp, as if he wanted to see right through me. I gave a cold smile. In the past, I would always stay up late waiting for him to come home, waiting for his so-called overtime to end, but the company had long since locked the doors. The intimate photos of him with that friend on social media made me very uneasy. This happened again and again, until I was disheartened. Now, he was waiting for me all night. Why didn't I understand this earlier? I said calmly, "Guillermo, this has nothing to do with you. There's nothing to talk about between us." Guillermo frowned, as if considering a solution, and then said seriously, "You still owe me money, so this should allow me to intervene, right?" I pressed my temples and felt a wave of exhaustion. Disappointment reached a critical point and turned into boredom. I had lost patience with Guillermo. I pressed my eyebrows and held back a headache. "Guillermo, if you really care about me, you should know that I have never used your money in the past 3 years, and my card has never been touched." But Guillermo wouldn't let go. He asked me what was going on with all the clothes, watches and bags. I interrupted him, my tone cold. "Guillermo, everyone around you is just trying to curry favor with you for their own gain, that's why you think everyone is like that. But I'm different." I said clearly, "I'm different from them." Guillermo pursed his lips slightly. He said, "Jiangqing, can we talk about this again?" I shook my head and said, "What's there to talk about, Guillermo? I've decided to end this. Is it because of a phone call from Suyu that you rushed to leave me? Or is it that as soon as Suyu returned to China, you stopped coming home at night, and your office was empty?" Suyu's words disappointed me. "You don't even give me the most basic respect, treating me like something you can just discard? Even though it's all in the past, my heart still aches. Those past events are like sharp knives, stabbing into my heart again and again, the pain almost making it impossible for me to breathe." I took a deep breath and asked Guillermo, "So what do you want to talk about?" I gave a wry smile. "Have you finally seen Suyu's true face and want to come back to me?" Guillermo was silent, his eyes a little red, his voice low and hoarse. "Jiangqing," he lowered his head to avoid my gaze. "I can't do it. I've waited for her for too long." I closed my eyes and felt a sharp pain in my chest. I heard my own voice, coldly saying, "Then don't come and interfere in my life, understand? Who I go out with and whose room I go to is none of your business. From now on, you and I will go our separate ways." Guillermo stood there, clenching his fists and trembling slightly. I turned and walked towards the door. The cold morning wind dispelled my drunkenness and took away the last vestiges of my attachment. Back home, I rummaged through the bedroom under the influence of alcohol. Among the clutter, I found the precious sketchbook. This is the only thing I have kept that is related to Guillermo. Guillermo was very talented as a child, and the picture album vividly depicts 2 children, a quiet, handsome little boy and a lively, cute little girl. The The little boy always takes the initiative to hold the little girl's hand, as if it were his responsibility. Even when they are bullied, they still hold each other's hands tightly and face the difficulties together. Time has left its mark on the picture album, and the once clear lines have now become blurred. But I still treasure it as a treasure, and when Guillermo was about to throw it away, I insisted on bringing it home and flipping through it from time to time. Only when I look at these drawings can I remember the warmth that Guillermo once gave me. Once, he also firmly held my hand, as if he would never let go. I closed the album and went to sleep with my clothes on. I had a restless dream that night. Sometimes it was the young Guillermo leading me through the crowds, and sometimes it was the current Guillermo looking at me coldly. I felt tired and said to myself, let's just part ways. I didn't wake up until the sun was high in the sky. I realized that my mother had called me several times, hoping that I would go to the office before lunch and accompany Shinrui for a walk to see the city's sights. I noticed that my mother was particularly enthusiastic about my meeting with Shinrui. But I also understood that in our circle, most people eventually ended up in business marriages. Everyone was compromising with reality, except me, who insisted that I could hold hands with Guillermo forever. Under family pressure, I refused the arranged marriage arranged by my father and even postponed taking over the family business. To this day, I still insist on not marrying a man without feelings, and I am unwilling to force myself for the sake of the family business. Although I had planned to refuse Shinrui's invitation, the scene that night always echoed in my mind, especially the hint of vulnerability that came over him as he leaned against the window. The fleeting look of loss in his eyes made it difficult for me to refuse him. At noon, I drove to the family business building. In the lobby, I absent-mindedly checked my phone, waiting for Shinrui to arrive. Suddenly, I noticed a pair of shiny leather shoes approaching. I looked up to say hello, but froze. Guillermo was standing in front of me, his suit neatly pressed, but the fatigue in his eyes made his chiseled face look haggard. He looked at me with mixed feelings. Jiangqing, why are you here? We're over. What's the point of you coming to see me now? The other day when I called out to you, you didn't even turn your head. I frowned. I'm not here to see you. Guillermo frowned. So what are you doing here? I'm waiting for someone. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt someone gently pull my sleeve. Then the person put an arm around my shoulder and asked with a smile, have you been waiting long? Let's go. I turned my head and saw Shinrui. Today he was wearing casual clothes and his hair was a little messy, which made him seem more casual than the last 2 times I saw him. He tilted his head and smiled at me, saying that he wanted to take me out to relax. I looked at his handsome profile and the dimples that appeared slightly, and my heart suddenly felt warm. I nodded lightly and said, okay, let's go to the nature reserve on the outskirts of the city. The scenery there is pretty good. Shinrui and I walked out side by side, completely ignoring Guillermo by our sides. However, Guillermo whispered, Jiangqing. Wait! Guillermo's voice was a little choked up, but I didn't stop, I just kept walking. Just turn around and look at me, just once. He pleaded. I waved my hand and drove off in the sports car with Shinrui. Many people at the company stared at my car curiously. Guillermo was the one who was most shocked. He sent me a WeChat message asking where I got the sports car. Did Shinrui give it to me? Jiangqing, you're not attracted to his money, are you? After a while, he sent another message saying that he knew me and that I wasn't that kind of person. Shinrui's circle is very different from ours, he was just teasing you. I replied coldly, maybe we are both like that. Guillermo didn't say anything. Shinrui took my phone away, and since I came out to relax, I shouldn't think about those annoying things. He looked out the window. Life is short, why not enjoy yourself in time? If a glass of wine can't relieve your sorrows, then have another one. I thought of his melancholy again, and couldn't help but ask, Mr. Shin, it seems like you have some regrets in the past? Shinrui took his eyes off the window and smiled at me, saying that I can just call him Sharui. He looked at the scenery of the nature reserve and said calmly, my ex-girlfriend knew nothing about my background at first and kept making promises. Later, I took over the family business and refused some of her unreasonable demands. As a result, she had someone kidnap me and tried to extort a large sum of money. After getting what they wanted, they planned to take extreme measures. I froze. After a while, I apologized to him for asking these questions. Shinrui waved his hand and said it was okay, it was all in the past. He pushed a lock of hair behind his ear and said, I survived that period by numbing myself with alcohol. That's why I suggested you drink last time. I know exactly what it's like to have your feelings hurt. His tone was flat, but I thought about how Shinrui was only 26 or 27 years old and had to take on responsibility after his father had a sudden heart attack. He must have been desperate when he was betrayed by his lover. I hesitated for a moment and finally patted him on the shoulder and said, what's in the past is in the past. I took Shinrui for a walk on the outskirts of the city. On the way, I stopped to check my phone. I saw that Guillermo had posted a friend request, and she had finally accepted. The picture showed Guillermo standing in the lobby of the company, accepting the roses handed to her by Suyu, with a ring sparkling on her ring finger. Guillermo's best friend left a comment in the comment section, saying that some people had missed their last chance. I looked at the photo of Guillermo and Suyu embracing, and my heart felt a little complicated. I couldn't tell what I was feeling. It was like the sword of Damocles that had been hanging over my head had finally fallen. Instead, I felt much more relaxed. I put down my phone and continued to accompany Shinrui playing dinner and watching movies. After dropping Shinrui off, it was already 10 p.m. On my way home, I received a phone call. It was Guillermo calling, and he was very drunk. Jiangqing, I posted a status update on WeChat. Why didn't you respond at all? I answered with a cold smile. What kind of response do you expect from me? Do you want me to send you a blessing and a red envelope? Guillermo was silent for a while, and then he asked hoarsely, Jiangqing, are you very unhappy? He said, as long as you are not satisfied, just let me know, and I will. He didn't finish his sentence. I responded coldly, and you will what? Do you want to give up Suyu for me? Guillermo was silent for a long time. I couldn't help but laugh. Guillermo, if you want a blessing, then I will bless you. I wish you and Suyu a long and happy life. Don't bother me anymore, you know in your heart. Guillermo didn't respond. There was a long silence at the end of the line, and finally he said, I used to feel that I couldn't let go, but now, I feel lost. Jiangqing, I saw you with Shinrui and it made me feel very uncomfortable. I sneered, hung up the phone. Hope is ultimately no match for reality. My mother finally broke into a relieved smile when she saw that I no longer groveled to an unknown male employee. She hinted that it was time for me to take over the company, starting with the project with Shinrui. Soon after, Guillermo sent a WeChat message, Jiangqing, I've made a big mistake. I didn't hesitate to block him and sever all contact. Guillermo's friends attacked me in their moments, accusing me of making Guillermo feel desperate. Even Suyu called to question me, Jiangqing, your tactics are really clever, but Guillermo is nothing more than a plaything in your heart. After hanging up, I looked at the custom-made suit my mother had prepared for me and fell into deep thought. I wondered if Suyu realized that her new boss was actually me, Jiangqing. At the department meeting the next day, everyone from the cooperation department was present. Suyu and Guillermo, as managers, were already seated, anxiously waiting for the arrival of the chairman's daughter. They wore a smile of flattery on their faces, but they didn't expect to be greeted by me. Guillermo stood up abruptly, Jiangqing? What's wrong with you? Before he could finish his sentence, the assistant manager respectfully introduced, this is the boss's favorite, and from now on, everyone should call her little boss. I hope everyone can support and help her. Guillermo froze in place, as if he had been struck by lightning. I saw his face change suddenly, and his eyes revealed surprise, confusion, and remorse. Manager Gu, if you feel uncomfortable, I suggest you leave first. I said indifferently. Guillermo seemed to have lost all his strength and fell back into his chair. Suyu hurriedly helped him up, looking worried herself. I began to chair the meeting and listened to the reports one by one. When it was Guillermo's turn to speak, he stuttered and couldn't express himself fully. I interrupted him coldly, saying that if Manager Gu was unable to do the job, he could ask his deputy to take over. This is a business that my mother worked hard to build, and I cannot let my personal emotions get in the way. Suyu was relatively calm, but her hands trembled badly as she opened the files. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When the meeting broke up, I had just walked out of the conference room when I heard Guillermo's urgent shout from behind me, Jiangqing. Wait! Unfortunately, his words were cut short. Shinrui was waiting at the entrance to my office, holding a bright bouquet of sunflowers in his hands. Mission accomplished. He was beaming, and the sunlight shining on him gave him and the flowers a golden glow. I smiled as I took the flowers. Thanks for your hard work. Come in and let's chat. Guillermo tried to follow up, but I left him at the door. Shinrui sat across from me, skillfully arranging the flowers. He said, Jiang, overall, our cooperation will come to an end next month. Then he winked, indicating that he might not be able to disturb me as often. A feeling of loss welled up in my heart. I watched his skilled movements as my mind kept recalling the bits and pieces of this period of time. He had been by my side during my most difficult days. Suddenly, I blurted out, Can I go to your city? To your city. Shinrui looked up, his eyes gentle, and smiled slightly, saying, I'm always waiting. I swallowed, my heart racing, feeling like there was something else I wanted to say. Suddenly, the office door was pushed open, interrupting the mood. I turned around unhappily and saw Guillermo walk in. His eyes were red, and he asked in a hoarse voice, Are you really the Jiang family's eldest daughter? I nodded. Shinrui smiled and said, Manager Gu, you've been raising President Jiang's treasure for 3 years. Guillermo's face turned pale and his voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at his chiseled face and couldn't find a trace of the young man I once knew. I closed my eyes and finally let go. Guillermo, I'm not just the daughter of the Jiang family. When I was little, I had a name, Suyu. As soon as the words left his mouth, Guillermo suddenly slumped to the ground, knocking over the teacup with his elbow. Blood ran down the back of his hand, but he didn't seem to notice. He just stared at me blankly, as if he were seeing me for the first time. After a long while, he muttered to himself, his voice full of self-blame and remorse. He asked himself, What on earth have I done? I remember when I was a child, my mother was the daughter of a wealthy family and took her grandmother's surname, Su. My grandmother was addicted to gambling and squandered the family's money, eventually leaving my grandfather and us. As a result, we were reduced to squalor and desperately trying to pay off our debts. Once the richest kid in school, I was now the poorest and naturally became the target of bullies. There was a boy at school called Guillermo. His father was disabled and his mother was mentally unstable, so he was often bullied too. The first time I was bullied, Guillermo suddenly appeared in front of me and grabbed my hand and ran. He was agile and had extraordinary skills, making it hard to catch up with him. That was the first time I saw him. In the days that followed, we supported each other, faced difficulties together, fought the bullies, endured hunger and cold, and tried every means to find a way out. Later, my mother took me somewhere else and changed my school. I was close to Guillermo, and at one point even ran away from home, which resulted in my mother calling the police to retrieve me. When we were forced apart, I promised Guillermo that I would come back for him one day. During the days apart, I kept thinking about the young man who had experienced so much with me. Fortunately, my family's situation gradually improved and we were finally able to return to our hometown. Unfortunately, my grandfather died from overwork. My mother said that my grandmother had abandoned the family, and that my grandfather had worked hard for us, so she thought that my mother and I should take my grandfather's surname instead. So I changed my name from Suyu to Jiangqing. When our family returned to our hometown, it so happened that Guillermo was working in my company. He was very good and hardworking, but he seemed to have forgotten my existence. When I tried to get close to him, I discovered that he avoided talking about the past and had cut off contact with everyone who knew his past. I concealed my identity and pursued him with all my might, and finally stood by his side. I thought this fulfilled my promise, but I didn't realize that I was just a substitute, accompanying him through a period of time. Now, as I watch Guillermo, who has fallen to the ground, the once burning love has calmed down like water. Only in the depths of my heart does Suyu, the person I once was, continue to cry in pain. Once upon a time, we vowed to spend our lives together. Once upon a time, we were so close, inseparable. But in the end, we have come to this. I asked someone to bring iodine and band-aids. I squatted down to disinfect Guillermo's wound and then gently said to him after applying the band-aid, I was naive enough to think that we would keep our promise and go on together. Guillermo held back his tears, his voice choking with a low sob full of pain. But fate has brought us to this point. I helped him up and got up, saying, Guillermo, we can't go on anymore, so let's say goodbye. Tears welled up in Guillermo's determined face. His deep eyes were filled with pain and struggle. After a long while, he spoke with difficulty. If I had known it was you, I would never have treated you like this, but it's too late now. I pushed open the office door. Guillermo, the best time has passed, and we are now at an impasse. That day, Guillermo waited outside my office for a long time in a low mood. Eventually, my mother was alerted. When she arrived, I was handing Guillermo an album, the only thing I kept of all the things you gave me. Now that I think about it, there's no need to keep it. We should look forward. Guillermo turned the album heavy-heartedly, his gaze resting on the two pictures of children. One child was being bullied, the other furious. One was running away, while the other was distracting the pursuer. They sat together, quietly gazing at the sky. As they parted ways, they made a vow, promising to meet again in the future. The words were full of sincerity. The years that followed seemed like a farce. Guillermo flipped to the last page, tears silently sliding down his face, moistening the paper. He closed the picture book, turned around and left quickly. The lonely back and trembling shoulders instantly reminded me of the bullied teenager. My mother asked me, "Do you still want to keep him?" I paused for a moment, thinking that if his performance was good, I would keep him, otherwise, I would let him go. In fact, I trusted Guillermo. That young man who had struggled his way up from the slums had changed his character and broken free from the shackles of the past. He undoubtedly deserved the position. He had just not fulfilled the promise he made as a child. However, that was no longer important, the past was history. I turned to Shinrui and wanted to tell him that I planned to go on a business trip to his place this month, and I wondered if that was convenient. Shinrui stared at me quietly. After a moment, he handed me a sunflower with the words "You are always welcome" written on it. Suyu handed in her resignation. She had no choice but to face me every day and follow my instructions. Although she had received help from Guillermo in her career, she had heard that she had had difficulty finding a job after resigning and was having a hard time making ends meet, so she had the idea of returning again. However, I don't want to resume the relationship of the past, nor do I want others to treat me as a retreat. This is true both in career and in relationships. After that day, Guillermo took a month's leave, and this person who had never taken leave for many years actually took a whole month in a row. A month later, he waited for me downstairs at the company. He had lost a lot of weight, his hair was unkempt and uncut, and the exquisite suit he had originally worn had been replaced with casual wear, a couple style that we had purchased together. When he saw me, tears welled up in his eyes. Jiangqing, in this month, I have been to many temples, hoping that time could turn back. He laughed self-deprecatingly. I know it's just fantasy, but I can't help myself. Who knows if the gods and Buddhas will have mercy? If there is a chance to start over, I would rather give everything than do this to you. I looked at my watch and said plainly, Guillermo, I have other arrangements. And please don't take any more days off work, as I've been busy with work lately, not because of illness or family matters. Guillermo froze. After a long while, he gave a bitter smile and asked me, I don't have a chance anymore, do I? I didn't answer, because Shinrui had already appeared before my eyes. Shinrui smiled broadly and walked towards me, saying, I'm worried about you getting stuck in traffic, so I arrived early. I took Shinrui's arm and said, let's go. First let's have dinner, then go to the movies. We walked side by side, completely oblivious to Guillermo behind us. From behind came a soft sound of weeping. Jiangqing, I came this time to resign. I no longer have the courage to face you. Shinrui stopped in his tracks and looked at me. Should I try to persuade you? I shook my head, no. Turning to Guillermo, I gave a sincere smile, as if I had returned to my younger days. Guillermo, I agreed. I wish you a bright future. After saying this, I took Shinrui's hand and we left quickly. The sound of weeping behind us gradually became more sorrowful. But I had no time to look back. There was still a long way ahead, and Shinrui and I would be walking it together. I held Shinrui's hand tightly, and he squeezed back gently, conveying silent support. This time, neither of us would let go. I don't like people talking about my childhood. It was the darkest and most difficult period of my life. Later, I studied hard and worked hard, all to escape the shadows of my childhood. I was mocked and bullied, but there was one figure I could never forget. It was the innocent smile of a little girl. Her name was Suyu. Her family had once been wealthy, but then they fell on hard times and became the target of bullying. I didn't want to get involved, but when Suyu's family was rich, she was the only one who treated me well and even invited me to eat imported ice cream. She handed it to me without a care in the world, and I think she may have forgotten about it, but I've always remembered it. So when her family's situation worsened, I couldn't help but get close to her and help her, which caused me a lot of trouble. I was beaten many times because of this, and once I almost fainted. I didn't tell Suyu, for fear that she would feel guilty. She was the only ray of sunshine in my otherwise gloomy life, and I didn't want to make her sad. Even if I got beaten up, it didn't matter. Suyu gradually became my inseparable companion. With a serious voice, I promised her, when I grow up, I will work hard to make money, and then I will marry you. At that time, I thought that promising to marry someone was a guarantee that they would never leave. Suyu was more mature than me, and she knew that wasn't realistic. Poor kids like us can't afford to fall in love, or we'll be in trouble. But she seemed to be moved by my words, and nodded, saying, "Okay, I'll wait for you." Even today, I still don't understand why she agreed. Later, she had to transfer to another city, and I cried in her arms. Suyu had always been a cautious person, but that day she was like charmed, and said, "Why don't we just run away together? We can survive by scavenging." That day, I met Jiangqing. She didn't seem to know how to strike up a conversation at the bar, so she just kept drinking, hoping to get my attention. I didn't take such an innocent girl seriously. However, that night, I still took her home. It wasn't because I was impressed by the way she drank. I saw a familiar shadow in her. It was a figure buried deep in my memory, sealed away with my shameful past. At first I thought she was a waitress at the bar. On the way home, I had drunk a little too much and called my best friend, commenting sharply on the rich girls. Then I turned on my former classmates, criticizing their fawning attitude. She was sitting in the passenger seat, and her body stiffened involuntarily. I noticed her reaction and couldn't help but smile, asking if I had scared her. "Don't worry, I can do better than that." She forced a smile and began to ponder. She told me her name was Jiangqing, and she had neither money nor a job. I mentioned that our boss also had the surname Jiang, and half-jokingly asked if we should check the family tree, perhaps finding some interesting connections. She smiled slightly, a little uncomfortable. Jiangqing has a very good appearance and a great figure, and I quickly wanted to live with her. She is simple, and although I gave her a bank card and bought a lot of things and luxuries, she always maintained an innocent attitude. I even felt that she was likely to become a nun, with inner peace. However, she always maintained a kind of almost obsessive devotion towards me, and despite what everyone around her said, that I was just playing with her, she still wanted to take the relationship seriously. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. People have emotions. Every night I wake up from a nightmare, I hold her close, almost as if I want to merge her into my life. Whenever I cry drunk and call out her name, she is always the first to rush to my side, and says in a gentle voice, "I will be your strongest support." Whenever I feel intense jealousy towards the rich, she always listens to my thoughts silently and gives me her silent support. 3 years have passed. I claim to the outside world that we are just casually dating, but I know that this is not the case. I really have feelings for her. I even wonder if I could be a regular employee and just spend the rest of my life with her, I would be content. Just when I was determined to take this relationship seriously, Suyu came back. On the day Suyu returned, I didn't invite her, but Suyu still saw her picture from a friend and sneered, saying that she looked good. I just smiled and didn't say anything. A few days later, Suyu applied for a transfer back to the headquarters and asked to work with me, hoping that I could give her more guidance in her career. I agreed. Suyu said excitedly, "That poor woman, it's time to let go, right? You should also consider your future." This sentence made me feel uncomfortable. I don't like people describing someone as poor, and I dislike saying this about Jiangqing even more. In front of me was Suyu. With her, I could enter high society, and my descendants could also create their own future in a field that I could not reach before. My childhood experiences made me feel inferior, and this feeling became distorted in my heart, like a terrible monster that devoured my emotions and conscience. I had to completely get rid of the stigma of the past and become a brand new self, a Guillermo who had erased the past. Those few days, I was afraid to look directly at Jiang Qing, and I didn't even dare to say more than a few words. Jiang Qing, however, thought I was under too much pressure and wanted to get a cat to help me relieve it. She made me soup and even invited me to go hiking, showing great care and concern. After much thought, I decided that I still needed to use alcohol to muster the courage to speak to Jiang Qing. I invited my best friend to a get-together with Jiang Qing and drank a lot. The whiskey made me tear up. When I was drunk and unconscious, I lay next to Jiang Qing and calmly said that we should end it. All the hard work over the years has made me more focused on goals and less concerned about relationships. I said this lightly, watching Jiang Qing's eyes change from bright to dark in the dim light. I thought she would ask me to reconsider, and even in that moment, I hoped she would say something. If she showed even a little reluctance, I would reconsider. But she just stood up quietly, nodded slightly, and then turned and left. It seemed that the 3 years we had spent together and the memories we had shared meant nothing to her. I felt so angry. Sue said she suspected I had deep feelings for Jiang Qing and hoped I would introduce her to our new major client so she could put her mind at ease. We had heard that the major client had recently suffered an emotional setback and was in a low mood, so he could really use some company. This was a proposal that was in our interests, and in my usual style, I should have said yes without hesitation. However, that day, I actually wished that Jiang Qing would try to dissuade me. I might reconsider Jiang Qing, but I would never push her onto someone else. But Jiang Qing didn't have any lingering feelings. This fact deeply hurt my pride. I sneered as I handed Jiang Qing the room card, telling her to go accompany the client, and I would give you compensation for the breakup. At that time, Jiang Qing had already walked to the door, and the corridor light shone on her face. I saw a trace of pain in her eyes, which in turn made me feel a trace of pleasure. At least she was hurting because of me. I thought I had long been mentally prepared, but I never imagined that seeing Shenrui and Jiang Qing so close together would make me feel so uncomfortable. My whole heart felt as if it was being held tightly by an invisible hand, my fingernails dug deep into my palm, and the pain was unbearable as I stirred. This pain exceeded my capacity to bear, even though I had always been tough. Without a care for the stares of my clients, I rushed forward to confront Jiang Qing, even though I knew I no longer had the right to do so. The ever-elegant Jiang Qing looked at me with cold eyes and told me that I had no right to ask about her affairs. She sneered and asked, "Do you want to give up Suyu?" I thought I would have nodded without hesitation. Who wouldn't choose Suyu? But at that moment, I hesitated. My reason kept reminding me that Suyu was my only choice to get rid of the past. But a voice in my heart asked, "Can you really let go of Jiang Qing? Can you really let go?" I grew up in the most difficult environment and have long since learned to listen to reason. At that moment, I suppressed my emotions and firmly said that I could not let go of Suyu. The voice in my heart sighed deeply, as if it foresaw the pain and loneliness of the future. After Jiang Qing left, I was awakened by nightmares every night. In my dreams, there was always a group of people desperately chasing after me, chasing nonstop. A figure was always by my side, escaping with me. But I could never see her face clearly. Every night, I woke up in a cold sweat, and naturally, I reached around to find Jiang Qing's presence. But I could never find her. I stayed up until dawn many times, repeatedly telling myself that time would heal everything. Just like childhood, it would eventually become a vague memory. But I realized with horror that this time was different. Jiang Qing was different. I could not forget. When I saw Jiang Qing come to the company to find Shenrui, I felt a complex of emotions well up in my heart, a mixture of panic, jealousy, and pain. I even wanted to rush up to her and stop her, pleading with her to change her mind in front of Shenrui. Seeing her drive off in her luxury car made my heart even more panicked. I was worried that she was having too good a time with Shenrui and wouldn't want to come back. I called Jiang Qing and tactfully reminded her that Shenrui might not be serious and to be careful. In fact, I knew in my heart that I wasn't really concerned about her safety, but I couldn't accept the way she looked at other men. But Jiang Qing said to me calmly, "Aren't you also playing with me?" I froze, unable to argue. Yes, I had no right to teach Jiang Qing how to judge people. After all, wasn't I the one who had treated her worst? That day, Suyu proposed to me, and I agreed, a little dazed. I knew that I had no choice but to stay by Suyu's side. But deep down, I still felt like I had lost something precious, and my heart felt empty. I had thought of Jiang Qing in many guises, such as a public relations executive at a high-end club, a minor celebrity, or even a high-class white-collar worker. I never imagined that she was the heiress of the Jiang family. When she suddenly appeared in the meeting room, I was shocked. I was shocked because I felt that my career, which I had worked hard for many years to build, might be in jeopardy. After the shock wore off, a sense of unease came over me, and my heart was filled with unspeakable fear. I felt a great pain coming. I was so scared that I chased after Jiang Qing's office, disregarding my image, trying to get her attention. If she looked at me again, maybe she would remember our old love. But she didn't look at me. She was looking at Shinrui, with the same kind of look she used to give me. I never thought that my heart would ache so much when Jiang Qing looked at another man tenderly. It hurt so much that I had to press my hands against my chest, and I could hardly stand. But it's okay, I told myself, I've overcome so much over the years, I can overcome anything. But the next second, Jiang Qing told me that she was Suyu. I couldn't remain calm anymore. As soon as I heard the name Suyu, it was like a loud noise in my head. It was a psychological defense that I had been trying to close, a deep-seated memory. Those painful memories surfaced together. In the depths of the ruins, a little girl stood, staring at me. "Do you remember our promise?" I accidentally cut my hand, and the blood flowed, staining my entire palm, but I didn't care about it. I stared at Jiang Qing, and suddenly understood why she felt so familiar. The voice in my heart became clearer and clearer, and I should have realized this a long time ago. Tears flowed without me noticing. I endured the pain and tried hard to keep myself going. She was the pillar of my childhood, the vision of my adolescence, the only beautiful memory and pure light in my ugly past. I used it as entertainment, and when I got tired of it, I just discarded it. I suddenly remembered after breaking up with Jiang Qing, I found all the cards in the drawer and the gifts in the closet. But the only thing missing was the precious picture album. The picture album that I threw away, but Jiang Qing carefully preserved as a treasure, recorded every bit and piece of my childhood with her. Now, Jiang Qing has returned her precious picture album to me, severing the last connection between us. I lowered my head, trying to control my emotions, but I couldn't hold back the tears. Jiang Qing applied iodine and a band-aid to my wound, and sighed, saying, "Guillermo, we've really come to the end." I seemed to hear her whisper, "If you could have turned back just once during those days of waiting, we wouldn't have come to this point today." I suddenly felt that I had no response. I had worked hard for more than 10 years, never giving up easily. As long as I could still speak, I could defend myself. But at the moment, I really don't have the strength. I can let anyone down, but I can't let Jiang Qing down. This caused the last line of defense in my heart to collapse. My support completely collapsed. I took a month off work and started a purposeless journey alone. I trekked through the wilderness and climbed steep mountains, just hoping to find a chance to start over. This difficult journey became the driving force for me to persevere. Unfortunately, a month later, reality was still very cruel. My heart was like a desert, but the longing for Jiang Qing surged like a tidal wave. I couldn't help but go to see her. She was dressed in professional attire, capable and confident, with a bright smile. I suddenly realized that was a look I had never seen on her face before, and it was a joy I had never given her. My reason told me to let go and let her keep this joy, but my heart was full of resentment. Deep down, I longed to be with her. My Jiang Qing. Apart from my father, she is the only person in this world who has genuinely been good to me. She has given me the chance to be reborn twice, but I have foolishly wasted it. I wanted to go up to her and explain everything, to beg her forgiveness, but she just turned away indifferently. I followed her gaze and saw Shinrui standing there. He was wearing a custom-made suit, bathed in the sunlight, exuding an aura of success. His smile stung me, and the confidence was something I, a loser in trouble, could never touch. The facade I had built up over the years crumbled instantly, and the inferiority complex hit me again. I retreated into the shadows and watched Jiang Qing walk away with Shenrui by her side, filled with jealousy. At that moment, I finally understood that I had lost all my chances. It was time to quit. I quit my job. Once, I had worked hard to achieve success. But overnight, I lost my fighting spirit. So, I took the initiative to dissolve the engagement with Suyu. Suyu asked me, "Do you think I'm not good enough for you?" I didn't answer. In fact, it was me who felt that I was not good enough for anyone. I returned to my alma mater and opened a small cafe nearby. The cafe overlooks the playground, where I spent a lot of time with Jiang Qing. I remember one time, Jiang Qing pointed at the night sky and said to me, "Guillermo, my Scorpio is over here, and your Aries is over there." Although I didn't really know anything about astrology, I still blurted out, "They're not far apart," which means Scorpio and Aries are good friends and will never be apart. Jiang Qing laughed really nicely, just like us. Together forever. Now I run this cafe and look up at the starry sky on the playground day after day. Although I still can't tell the difference between the positions of Scorpio and Aries, it doesn't matter anymore. As long as that starry sky is the one that Jiang Qing and I looked up at together, that's enough. As long as those memories remain, I can go on living. In the years that followed, I remained alone. Jiang Qing's news often appeared in the major media. She married Shenrui happily and had a pair of children. Her career flourished, and she became more mature and stable, no longer the wayward and arrogant girl she once was. At a charity dinner, a reporter suddenly asked, "President Jiang, may I ask if you have only loved your husband in your life?" I noticed that Jiang Qing froze for a moment, then smiled. My heart felt like it was being stabbed. That year, I was already 40 years old, and I was finally able to tell the difference between a Scorpio and an Aries, but it no longer mattered. The rest of my life was long, and I would never be able to see Jiang Qing again, the girl I had lost forever.